Hello, I'm just doing a bit of analyzing of New Horizon Episode 1, which is a podcast which I will be attending, I have been attending, and will be attending in the future. This is the first episode, so a person named Ray Murasame is doing it, and she's a bit of a weird one, but a socialist of sorts, and me, her, don't agree with everything, but we get along, so we're gonna do this thing together. And the first episode we invited someone called Badco, which is a danky little he's a social anarchist, isn't he? A little memer. Which was a memey little cunt. I have no issue with memes. I do like them jokes from all sides, left and right, you know. Big fan of Murdoch, and a big fan of social anarchistic mumbo jumbo. Because you laugh, you point, you understand the enemies. That kind of junk. But I personally want to go into something that Badco himself quite early on went into talking about. And I kind of understood that he's either unknowledgeable, liar, and incompetent. I'm very mean. No. We start talking about, well, in the first about hour of this fucking thing, it was the left-wing echo chamber. I mean, I didn't go in very much talk because it didn't feel like I could do much, but I got my points in whenever I could. Matkov started to mention the enemies that the right wing sees, meaning, I don't remember what it was for, and it's exactly what we're talking about, because we went on quite many side trails. But it was something about the right wing seeing Muslims as enemies. Yeah, it was with the bomber. That the right wing sees Muslims or Native Americans or people of minority status as enemies, as the bad people. And you wondered, oh, the right wing have these enemies, oh, bad thing the right wing have enemies. I pointed out that all ideologies have enemies. It's just a kind of big thing. And I want to go into detail with that. He also mentioned, why did the right wing have minorities as enemies, which is a rather interesting concept to look into. But I will do that later. But first I want to go into the idea of enemies. So, I don't know how to say this, but I'm quite fond of a political scientist named Carl Schmitt, which was a Nazi, well, yeah, oof, big time, but he was quite important before, during, and after the Third Reich, so it wasn't that spoopy. But he went into the idea of enemies. I'm gonna be quoting quite a lot here, kind of taking a bit too many chunks. But many interesting parts where he discussed what an enemy is and how people kind of see enemies. He claimed, first of all, that all ideologies has an enemy, and you cannot build your, not identity, but you build your standing, your power around constructing an enemy. Either constructing or pointing out an enemy. I'm gonna take a few things that I fancied quite a lot. First thing he's talking about here is the enemy in the state. Saying here, a decision is political if and only if it's able to obtain from the members of a given community their readiness to die and to kill other human beings with no hesitation. What he's talking about here is, this is important because the word community is the key word here. This is community we're talking about. Community, ideology is the same thing. If you're a fascist, if you're a social anarchist, it doesn't really matter. You have a community, you have someone that's us. And what he's talking about here is the nation. Any political identity that achieves such an aim is likely to become a state. In turn, unlimited willingness by the members of the community to obtain, if and only if, the actual perceived the selective counterparts, the enemy, as the other, the stranger, and it's sufficient from his nature that it is an especially intense way, existentially something different and alien, so that in extreme case conflicts with him are possible. The enemy is therefore whoever is actually provocated by someone as the totally other, if compared with their own tradition, way of life, whose security and independence is threatened, at least potentially, by the existence itself of the enemy. So what Bo did, and this is so clear in the live stream, what Bo kind of mentioned many times, while he points the finger on the right wing, saying the right wing are this, and this, and they hate brown people, just, minorities. Just saying brown people because it's simpler and it has a bit more of a swing. But what he does as well, he's creating a straw man. He's creating, the right wing. No one define the right wing. So I mean, anarcho-capitalist doesn't like brown people. I guarantee that most of them do. At least maybe not in America, So he creates a straw man. He creates an enemy who is the opposition of him, who is the one that he have a struggle with. And this is, everyone does this. So don't shit on him. He shits on the right wing for this, but he himself did exactly the same thing in more or less the same sentence that he used, which is the fun part, the hypocrisy and the lying of it all. Him pointing the fingers, look how bad they are, and they're doing exactly the same thing, but he's not understanding it because he's not, I guess, not self-critical in that way, and also because he has to attack an enemy. He has to attack something because the identity of himself, the way of life what he is threatened by these right-wing circles. I mean, Pinochet thrown under the helicopter, which is the right-wing like to use the Pinochet helicopter, but the left-wing used as an enemy. Look, if we allow this right-wing people to win, they're going to kill us. So anyways, I will continue reading some of the stuff I wrote down. Schmitt justified under an existential point of view, according to him, if properly identified or created, the enemy generates a readiness to die and kill, and conversely, if something reveals itself to be able to instill the readiness to die and kill the members of the community, this something ends up being the enemy. So what he's saying here is the enemy isn't a thing, really. It can be a thing, but it doesn't have to be a thing. This is mostly before World War II, this one, but he made a comment about these after World War II, but he stopped mentioning the Jews. Not in the Jews are bad, he doesn't really care about that, but how the Nazis identified the Jews as the enemies. And how important it was for them to do that. Otherwise, important, depends how you see history. If the point was, the Third Reich, then yes, seeing the Jews as the enemy is important. If the point was the Weimar Republic, obviously this is a bad thing. But you'll see how history sees it. So, you create an enemy, you able to make the people in your community say they're bad. I want them dead. I want them all this. With that, you say, haha, this must be the enemy, and that will become the enemy. And then you unite your people around the idea of there is a common enemy. And if I put that, I wrote something down. This one is a bit more oofy, but I wrote this one down as well. The first point of view, which the first point of view, which is possible to identify properly the enemy, only the actual participant can currently recognize, understanding and judge the concrete situation, and settle the extreme cases of conflict. Each participant is in a position to judge whether the adversary intends to negate his opponent's way of life and therefore must repulse or fight in order to preserve one's own form of existence. The second aspect is a type of justification on the basis on which waging war on the enemy legitimate war, the readiness of combatants to die, the physical killing of humans, our human beings, who belongs on the side of the enemy. All this has no normative meaning, but an existential meaning only. Meaning that in law, this is not a thing that is obviously seen. You don't see this in law books, but you see this in existential. With humans, you see this. So yeah, particularly in real combat situation with an enemy. And the third one being using the enemy to self-recognize or create a constitution based around who is endangering you. So I think the reason why nation states, nations, communities, all of this exists is because there is someone else that is not us, therefore we create us of sorts. Sometimes you have created yourself before, sometimes you create yourself during seeing the enemy. And the lovely thing about this, the communists love to take up Star Trek. It's usually one funny thing they'd like to take up. Where they say, oh, but all the people, creeds and colors are united under the Federation. So, yeah, they're united because they have enemies. They're not in the border, they're outside the border. Therefore, they can have this strong connection. If they didn't, well, they would create a new one. Like, I wish it was simple, everybody could live peacefully. But because there are different things, there are, different ideas out there, you can never fully not have an enemy. And this is very important. I've spoken to many communists, which are usually defining the Nazis as the enemies. I have gotten many questions many times, asking if I would kill a Nazi. No, I wouldn't kill a Nazi, is my answer. But I would kill Universal Order, bitch. That guy would get a knife through his fucking skull. Because he raped babies. I don't like people who rape babies. They can die. Something else I wrote here, I don't know what this is. The political entity proposes the real existence of an enemy and therefore coexists with another political entity. As long as the state exists, there will thus always be, well, more than just one state. Yeah, that's just what I mentioned. Whoopty. Read quite a lot about Carl Schmitt here. It's fucking fascinating stuff. Another thing I want to take up, I go into rants. If you listen to all of this, it's up to you. Was to say, right have the enemy of the minority. And it's actually not that hard to answer that either. Again, everybody has enemies. Always take that in mind. But the reason why they have enemies is because of disgust level. So within the puppeteering institution that I kind of volunteer with, we discuss three ways to see politics of an existential idea. One being disgust, which is usually conservative, fascists, more facts. We have the freedoms, which are the ANCAPs, the libertarians, Rothschilds. No, not Rothschild. What's his name? Rothbard. That's what I'm thinking about. Rothbard. The nap and shit like that. And then you have the CARE, which are usually more left-leaning socialist communists. Not always, though, because communists can also be in the idea of... Oh, it can be within all. Communists can be within all. It's usually social democracy and more heavy on nation and helping healthcare. Even globalists open borders are weird enough care, which is weird. But hey. So the enemies of these three are sometimes each other, mostly each other, but they all have one enemy. And the reason why conservatives are disgust is because things that are quote-unquote disgusting, which are, minorities, homosexuals, anyone who can ruin the family unit, when in Christian conservative households, obviously, the family unit. So anything that is in danger to that, anything that's danger to your genetic coding, because you don't want the sub-Saharan African male to mate with your beautiful, beautiful daughter and have retarded babies, mulatto babies. It's not really what you want. No one really wants mulatto babies. No, it's usually the other way around too. It's usually the man having sex with a brown woman to make the babies whiter, not the other way around. The reason why it's not the other way around is because the father would fucking kill that fucking brown piece of shit. In most cases, horrible as I said, but it's very true. It's usually discussed. So, and the disgust level is more common with mothers, and the older you get. The reason why with mothers, because a mother's job is usually to protect her infant child. You can't have them black people go around with the penis sack or slap. No, Jesus Christ. The reason why I'm mentioning black people here is because that's usually the enemy. These others of non-traditional path. So any conservative, nationalistic, they usually care about, mostly about women actually, take care of that. And the reason why they care about women is, again, disgust. A man can deal with another man, I actually had a conversation with a friend recently where I'm not speaking to myself, am I? No, I am not. A conversation with a friend recently who we talked about a guy who's going around and showing his penis to people. It's going around in the city right now, kind of very annoying. It's not a big thing, but very annoying regardless. And if a man, if he does that to a man, you see his willy wally, you don't care. You do. You give him a right swing, you can knock him dead. No, God, no. You knock him down though. Probably would do that, or give him a right in between the legs. But when it comes to children and women, they do it because get a power. It's a different type of power there, and a man's job is usually to protect the family and the woman. So whenever he thinks about a woman being in danger, he becomes protective. And that's just why I mentioned the father and the daughter, because if the father thinks of the daughter having sexual intercourse with a black man or brown man, Arab, South Asian, whatever, Latin American, fucking MS-13 there, oof, they get disgusted and they hope not to do that, because his prodigy, his protection is with the women. You can blame the patriarchy as much as you want on this one. In a way, it is. The real question is this bad or good? I personally say this is good. But there's obviously discussions we can have. That can last quite long. It would be interesting to have this. So yeah, that's why conservatives care more about the brown people. And the other one have other enemies, but I'm not going to go into that now because this is getting way too long. Thank you, everybody. Those are my thoughts and ideas.